Some people are born to lead, Dad said into the microphone, grinning wide for the cameras. And some are just good at pretending. Laughter erupted, sharp and brittle, ricocheting off the marble pillars of the Whitaker Foundation's grand ballroom. I stood 2 tables away, frozen, a champagne flute trembling slightly in my hand. He wasn't looking at Cole. He was looking at me. Under the stage lights, Dad's silver hair gleamed like a halo. To the crowd, he was magnetic, witty, untouchable. But just for a beat, he looked like Richard again. And then he was gone. I couldn't move. The laughter swelled around me like rising water. My heart pounded against my ribs. A hand brushed my elbow. Judge Eleanor Monroe. Her expression was carved in stone. The crowd shifted back. She's always been a bit intense, hasn't she? Poor girl. This must be terribly awkward. Cole's the future anyway. I set the glass down slowly, carefully, as if the slightest misstep might shatter everything. Was this why Dad invited me tonight? A public finale to months of erasure? Piece by piece, he'd been cutting me out of his world. I turned toward the towering windows, my reflection ghosted against the skyline. Years ago, in this same ballroom, I'd told him I wanted to build something real, something that mattered. He'd placed a hand on my shoulder, smiled, and said, "You will, Lauren. You already are." That same hand had lifted me up, and now pushed me down without hesitation. The mayor's voice thundered from the speakers, announcing the next event. I didn't hear it. Just the blood rushing in my ears. The laughter. The snap of something fracturing beneath the surface, something that might never heal. Why tonight? Why me? Why now? I didn't leave. Not yet. Some stubborn part of me needed to see it for myself. The Whitaker Foundation exhibit sat just off the main ballroom, a sleek installation showcasing scholarships, outreach, humanitarian work. At the center had always been a photo, my father and me at my first gala. My face glowed with pride, his hand rested on my shoulder. Tonight, only one figure smiled from beneath the glass. They had cropped me out, flawlessly, surgically. You'd never know I'd been there. A new placard glinted under the spotlight, "The Future of Philanthropy, Cole Whitaker." Off to the side, half hidden behind lilies, was my Young Philanthropist Award. Cracked. The frame bowed, like someone had stepped on it. I stared at it, numb. A hollow hum buzzed beneath my ribs, like wind through shattered glass. Behind me, the gala continued, laughter, music, the sound of a world moving on without me. My heels clicked softly as I turned away. Then I felt someone fall into step beside me. Evan. My cousin. Once my fiercest ally in this golden cage. He didn't joke. Didn't smile. He leaned in and whispered, "You need to be careful, Lauren. It's bigger than you think." Before I could respond, he disappeared into the crowd, vanished into the shimmer of dresses and clinking glasses. I lingered, alone, in the space where my history had been. The message was clear. I hadn't just been pushed aside. I'd been erased. And someone was making sure I stayed that way. The balcony doors opened with a soft hiss, a thin ribbon of cold air slicing into the ballroom. I stepped out, chasing silence. The stone terrace wrapped around the building, bathed in soft light. Inside, the gala waltzed on, champagne, charm, pageantry. But I wasn't alone. 2 voices murmured behind a column, sharp, low, urgent. "She's not the real problem," said a woman, Ms. Green, a board member. "It's the mayor. He's too tied to her projects. If Richard doesn't act fast, this all blows up." "He knows," Mr. Wallace replied. "That's why he's pushing Cole. Clean face, clean start. The grant depends on it." "Grant?" I held my breath. If the mayor finds out about the zoning deal linked to the new community center, it's over, for the foundation and half the council. Green sighed. That's why Richard had to cut her loose. She was never going to play the game right. They moved off, returning to the party. I stood there, pressed to the stone, their words echoing through me. This wasn't just personal. It was political. Strategic. And I had become a liability. Inside, they toasted to progress. But behind their smiles, the knives were out. And my father was at the center of it all, charming the cameras while quietly closing the door behind me. The next morning, the sunlight felt harsh, slicing through the blinds like judgment. I hadn't slept. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, paper and memory strewn before me, trying to piece together a puzzle I hadn't known I was part of. The grant. The zoning deal. The foundation's rebranding. I dove into public records, city archives, anything I could find. The pieces snapped into place with inevitable clarity. The new community center Richard had so publicly championed, the one Cole was now paraded as the face of, wasn't philanthropy, it was leverage, a pipeline linking private developers, backdoor rezoning approvals, and a steady stream of money that circled back to Richard's old political allies. If it came to light, it wouldn't just scorch the foundation, it would take the mayor and half the city council down with it. They needed a fresh face, clean, compliant, someone who'd sign whatever was handed to him with a grin. Cole, not me. Buried in the foundation's internal files, documents I should have been locked out of, but wasn't, I found the real proof, a confidential memo. Subject, Mitigation Strategy, L. Whitaker. It read like a surgical report. Flag her emotional volatility, note repeated conflicts with board leadership, frame it as a personal crisis, one requiring space, reflection, and compassion. A script, in case I made noise. We support Lauren during this difficult time. She's chosen to step back to focus on personal matters. The foundation wishes her well. Polished lies, weaponized sympathy, a quiet execution dressed as concern. And at the bottom, in bold ink, was my father's signature. He didn't just allow it. He authored it. My throat burned, but the tears never came. Only one thought remained, clear, steady, and cold. If they could erase me this easily, they could erase everything I built. And I wasn't going to let them. I didn't storm into the boardroom. I didn't confront my father. I didn't scream. I waited, I watched, I planned. There's a strange discipline in betrayal, a frost that hardens every impulse to beg, or rage, or crack the walls open. For the next 48 hours, I worked in silence. I pulled archived emails, financial records, internal memos, draft press statements that had never been released. I built a case, calm, comprehensive, damning. Not for revenge. For truth. I compiled it all into an anonymous packet. No emotion, no commentary, just facts. And I sent it to the one place Richard couldn't reach, the mayor's office. Specifically, to Elena Cruz, the mayor's chief of staff, ruthless, unsentimental, known for burning bridges before they caught flame. I sent copies to 3 key donors too, people whose reputations couldn't afford the fallout. No names attached, just data. There was risk. If they traced it back to me too soon, I'd be dismissed as the bitter daughter seeking attention. If they acted too late, the handoff would finalize, and the foundation would be lost. But sometimes, safety isn't an option. Sometimes, you walk into the fire, not because you expect to win, but because walking away means surrendering to the lie. The gala was 72 hours away. Richard thought he'd buried me quietly, deep beneath the marble floors of his empire. He didn't realize he'd only anchored me in bedrock. The night of the gala, the Whitaker Foundation glowed like a cathedral, chandelier light shimmered against crystal, champagne flowed like water, smiles, wider, tighter, practiced. Richard took the stage, one hand resting proudly on Cole's shoulder. He spoke of legacy, of vision, of the future. He never mentioned me. Cole accepted a silver plaque engraved with next generation leadership. He smiled, he waved, but I saw it, the tremble in his fingers as he gripped the edges. He wasn't as sure as he looked. Neither were they. I noticed the first cracks in the donor section, a look exchanged, a whisper passed too quickly, a woman in pearls tapping furiously beneath the tablecloth. The air shifted. Not enough to break the performance, just enough to curdle it. When Richard called for a standing ovation, only half the room rose, the rest hesitated. At my table, Judge Eleanor Monroe remained seated, hands folded, eyes like steel. Across the ballroom, Mr. Wallace dropped his gala program, face down, a quiet, deliberate fracture in the mask. The leak had started. Social media was already buzzing, reporters were asking questions, anonymous tips circulated, no names yet, no proof. But suspicion? Suspicion is gasoline in a room full of open flame. Richard smiled through it all, blinding, defiant, as if he could bend the story back to his will by sheer force of charisma. But cracks only spread. And beneath the golden glow, behind the applause and the polished silver, the empire he built began to shake. The program was supposed to end with Cole's coronation. Richard had carefully orchestrated it, a flawless, controlled story arc. Introduce the heir, celebrate the future, erase the past. The crowd was already shifting, preparing for the final toast. Then, unexpectedly, the mayor stepped to the podium. Mayor Thomas Ellery adjusted the microphone slowly, deliberately. The room stilled. The music faded to a polite hush. With a voice that carried clearly across the ballroom, he said, "Before we conclude tonight, there's one more honor to bestow." The pause hung heavy, calculated. I saw Richard stiffen, his smile tightening at the edges. "Tonight," the mayor continued, "we recognize an individual whose vision, integrity, and tireless work built the very foundation we stand upon." A ripple spread through the crowd, confusion, curiosity. My heart kicked once, hard. "Please join me in honoring our city's pride, Ms. Lauren Whitaker." A beat of stunned silence followed, a perfect, suspended moment, before the room exploded. Gasps, awkward claps, a murmur swelling into something impossible to ignore. I didn't move at first, I couldn't. The spotlight swung across the ballroom, searching, until it landed squarely on me. I stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room turn toward me, some wide with surprise, others narrowed in sudden calculation. Across the ballroom, Richard's face was carved in stone. Cole stared at the floor, the plaque still clenched tightly in his hand. I moved forward, each step deliberate, every muscle trembling with control. At the edge of the stage, Judge Monroe rose quietly, her hand steadying my back for just a moment before letting go. I climbed the stairs without looking back. The mayor extended his hand, his grip was firm, unwavering. "You built this city's hope, Lauren," he said, low enough for only me to hear. "They just wrote their names on it." The applause grew, not thunderous, not overwhelming, but real, real enough. I didn't smile, I didn't cry, I simply stood beneath the lights, the daughter they thought they'd erased, and let the truth, quiet and immovable, speak for itself. I didn't need to say a word. The mayor did it for me, with the precision only someone with everything to lose could manage. He turned to the audience, not with praise, but with numbers, projected behind us. On the massive screen, usually reserved for donor montages, came slides that cut through the room like scalpels. Number of community grants initiated under my leadership, 47. Number of scholarships dispersed from programs I personally designed, 312. Number of public records showing I had been stripped from authorship in the last 6 months, 19. Gasps, whispers, the sound of silverware forgotten on fine china. Then the next slide appeared. Internal memos, leaked emails, a document titled Mitigation Strategy, L. Whitaker flashed across the screen, with Richard's signature crisp and undeniable at the bottom. If questioned, suggest emotional instability, position as voluntary departure, encourage narrative of personal fatigue and transition. Someone in the audience, I couldn't see who, exhaled sharply, as if struck. Across the room, Richard remained still, eyes fixed on the screen, his gaze unblinking, refusing to acknowledge the truth laid bare. The mayor's voice remained calm, measured. "Our city thrives not on manipulation," he said quietly, "but on truth, and the truth is, Ms. Whitaker's contributions were not just significant, they were foundational." The applause came slower this time, less performative. Some clapped out of guilt. Some clapped because it was safe again. But others, the ones who mattered, clapped because the lie had cracked open, and the truth had finally found air. Richard didn't speak, he didn't stand. Cole remained seated beside him, the plaque now awkwardly resting on his lap, like something he didn't know how to hold anymore. I didn't gloat, I didn't turn toward them. The mayor placed the folder of evidence on the podium, closed it, and stepped aside. That soft click, the sound of the folder shutting, echoed louder than any accusation. I took a breath. Not the breath of someone victorious, the breath of someone free. When the lights dimmed, I didn't stay for the final toast. I walked out, before dessert, before the speeches finished, before anyone could pull me aside and say they had no idea. No one stopped me. Not Richard. Not Cole. Not the board. I passed the gallery on my way out, the same display where my face had once been cropped from the photo. Tonight, the image had been restored. Two figures again, me and him. I paused, reached up, and with quiet fingers, turned the frame face down on the velvet pedestal. Not out of spite, not out of anger. Simply to mark it finished. I kept walking, past the gilded staircase, past the lingering cameras, past the doorman who gave me a small nod. The kind you give to someone who just did something hard, and did it well. Behind me, the ballroom carried on. The music resumed, the murmurs shifted. Let them rewrite whatever they needed to feel comfortable again. I wasn't part of the revision anymore. Out on the steps, the night air hit my skin like truth. Cold, honest, unfiltered. For the first time in months, I wasn't holding anything back. Not grief. Not anger. Not hope. Just breath. I exhaled once, steady and full, then walked into the dark. Not away from anything, but toward something finally mine.